So if you haven't been paying attention, or maybe if you're just living under a rock, I'm here to tell you that, well, there's an election to name Toronto's next mayor currently going on in our city. And if you look across all the candidates, and there are a lot of them and their platforms, the number one hot button topic is how they intend to address the affordability crisis that we have in our city. And at the end of the day, a major cosmopolitan city like Toronto, and the one that it's evolving into, may never truly be affordable. There certainly are a lot of steps and policies that can be taken to help ease the pressure that we've been experiencing over the last couple decades. Now, the clear front runner, and literally she has been there right out of the gate, is Olivia Chow. And if you're watching this video, there's a very high probability she could be the mayor-elect or even mayor of our city by the time you're watching this. Now, the real question is what impact will Olivia Chow have as mayor on the future of Toronto real estate prices? And I'm here to give you a little precursor to that conversation to tell you to get ready, because real estate prices under Olivia Chow, despite all of her best stated intentions, are about to get a lot more expensive. I'm Ralph Fox, and I'm the co-founder and broker of record of Fox Marin Associates, and we are a boutique residential real estate brokerage that focuses on central and downtown Toronto. While real estate by nature is hyper-local, the purpose of this channel, Real Talk, is to talk about macro and geopolitical events that may shape the future of Toronto real estate. So if you find this content interesting or you have any questions, please be sure to subscribe to that red button right down below. And if you have any questions, we'd absolutely love to hear from you. There's this saying that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I think when you look at the last couple decades of Toronto real estate and you see all of the failed policy initiatives at all three levels of government, not just municipal, but also looking at provincial and federal, what you'll see is despite all of the sound bites and all of the goodwill by these politicians to help try to bring affordability into Toronto real estate, it's had the opposite of the intended effect. And I think the real issue here is that government really needs just to create smart, efficient policy and then get out of the way and let the private sector do the heavy lifting. And that clearly isn't going to be the case under Olivia Chow for sure. And if anything, it's just going to create more impediments and try to put more and larger government in place as the solution to affordability in Toronto. And that's not going to help. And neither is all of these increased taxes that she's proposing. So let's take a little bit more of a deep dive here. And one of the things that I just don't think politicians understand, or at least certain politicians understand, is that you cannot tax your way into housing affordability. I'll repeat that again. You cannot tax your way into affordability in housing. And all you have to do is just look at new construction, where 25% of the cost of new construction go immediately to taxes. So let's think about that for a second. If you have $1 million pre-built condo, 250,000 of that plus is going to pay taxes. Taxes are a barrier to affordability and not the opposite. And there seems to be this school of thought that if you increase taxes, it'll somehow slow demand, when we're still not focusing on the real core of the problem, which is supply. And, Olivia Chow right now is sitting back and she's talking about increasing property taxes. Well, how is that going to help with affordability in already one of the most expensive cities to live, let alone buy real estate in? And if you're a family on the cusp, if you're a senior citizen, if you're affected by variable interest rates, which a lot of people are, and inflation, how is going to make living in the city and owning real estate in the city more affordable for the average person who owns and lives in Toronto? It just doesn't make sense. And there is absolutely zero indication, and we'll jump into this in a second, but there's zero indication that those resources that the government is collecting is being well spent. And so, if you really start to dig down here and you look at some of her policies, she wants to bring in a $3 million luxury tax. Now, you have to keep in mind that Toronto is the only city in North America that has a double land transfer tax. So at the time of purchase, there already is a significant tax burden upon anybody looking to buy anything in Toronto. So you then start to wonder, well, what would an additional tax do? And you look at the effect that we're currently having with the double land transfer tax. So let's look at an example here. Let's say you bought a house 5 years ago in Leslieville, and hypothetically you paid $1 million for it. And that house today is worth $1.4 million. And you sit down with your partner and you have a great conversation and you're like, our jobs are going well. We've built up equity in our house. We've paid down our mortgage. Why don't we look at moving up? And so they start to think about, okay, well, why don't we look at buying a $2 million house? And then they realize that the land transfer taxes, the double land transfer taxes on making an upward move are going to cost them $100,000 plus just to pay the taxes. And they cannot roll that into their mortgage. So it starts to give a lot of pause where people are saying, well, you know what? The friction costs of selling our property and moving up the ladder are so cumbersome and so expensive. Let's stay where we are. Let's renovate, or let's go on a vacation, or let's put the money in the stock market. But moving up or moving lateral is just too expensive. And so that effect has really, really affected the turnover that we've had in real estate in Toronto. So if we take a look at this, we have a population of 7 million people. We have 2.6 million houses, and only 65,000 homes were sold last year. That's less than 2% of our existing supply turned over. And then if we start to look at the metrics of housing creation and how housing permits have dropped off by 28% and how we're not even coming close to building enough to keeping up with demand, we don't have enough existing turnover and we don't have enough new supply coming in the pipeline. And by making it more expensive to own more expensive homes, people will stay with what they have and make do with it or renovate where they're at. So this is going to continue to create a barrier and a pressure on homes priced $3 million or less. And then, of course, we know what happens anytime a new tax is introduced. It expands. It never detracts and it never, ever goes away. So what if that $3 million new luxury tax becomes $2 million? And over time, maybe it's at 2% and now it goes up to 3%. So this is only going to cause a significant problem in the existing inventory turning over at a time where we're already super choked on new supply. And so the more difficult you make it to make people buy something, the more they will choose to stay where they are with what they have or leave the city altogether. And that's because of affordability and taxes. It has nothing to do with smart government policy. Okay, so we've talked about the tax aspect of her vision for the future of Toronto. Let's look at, even more importantly, government interventions into our marketplace, which have never, ever worked out well for affordability in Toronto real estate. So the first thing that she talks extensively about is creating this advocacy campaign to bring back full rent control across the province. Now, rent control is under the jurisdiction of the provincial government. However, she is trying to create this pressure on the current government and hopefully, in her mind anyways, on the next government to bring back rent control. Now, if we look at what these controls, government controls, have done before in the past, we can just go from the time period from 1970 to 1997, where we had full rent control in the entire province. Rents could not be raised even after a tenant left. And what happened in that time period? Well, I'll tell you, not one single purpose-built apartment or unit was built across the entire province because there was no financial incentivization for an investor or a developer to put their money into residential real estate. And that is a huge reason why most of our current inventory that's purpose-built is old and aging And while we do have some new projects starting to come online through government incentivization and a relaxation of rent control rules, you take this away, that is all going to stop, especially at a time where you have high interest rates and high inflation. It really will pull the death knell on supply. If you're an investor, even if you're just a mom and pop investor and you're thinking about buying in pre-construction, and you now know as a landlord, you have zero rights and you can't raise rents and you can't keep in line with inflation and you can't keep in line with interest rates, and there is no way to even reasonably recoup your return, why would you put your money into Toronto real estate? And so what happens is capital is fluid and it will go elsewhere other than Toronto real estate if you put in too much control and you make it difficult for anybody to want to become a landlord or remain a landlord. And in order to open up supply, we need the exact opposite approach. And so what you're going to see with bringing back rent control, if it were to happen, is you're going to see a lot more tighter circumstances, and you're going to see that black market happen where units get turned over between friends. It's not going to help the long-term story of Toronto real estate and bringing in supply, which is what we need, not government controls, but supply. Now, the other interesting thing that she talks about is she wants to bypass developers and have the city itself build 25,000 new rental units on its own. And I quote her where she says, "We don't have to rely on private developers to build the houses we need. We can do it ourselves and we can keep houses affordable." Now, this is a very utopian mindset, but in reality, governments, cities, municipalities are not efficient at building. If you just look at what's happening at the debacle on the Eglinton line, where they're now $1 billion over budget and there is no finish date anymore because they've been working at this for a decade. They've just sort of given up and, well, it'll happen when it happens and whatever cost, it'll be whatever cost. Private sector does not work that way. And so if you look at the track record of the city of Toronto, you go to 2019, where the city promised to build 10,000 homes. They haven't built one yet. And the other thing that people don't really know or understand is the city owns a lot of property and has a lot of tenants all across the GTA. And in 2019 alone, there were 62,000 complaints against the city-owned properties with pest control and roaches and bug infestations and all kinds of other health concerns. So the city is not going to be the most efficient way to alleviate supply. They're not going to be the most cost effective. Just look at the Eglinton line. Look at the track record in terms of their ability to manage an existing inventory. I don't know if you've ever walked through any of the sales where they sell off the houses, by the Toronto Housing Corporation. And I mean, these places are completely dilapidated, certainly not fit for, human habitation. And you wonder, well, how did this ever happen? And where is all our tax money going? So really, really, really a lot to think about, but the government is not going to be the solution. And the more the government tends to get involved, the more constrictions you have on investment and supply, and the less efficient government becomes, the more involved that they become. And so this really is starting to look like a force multiplier for continued constraints on supply at a time where we have all this immigration coming and no real plan as to how we're going to house all of these people. And if you understand the dynamic of supply and demand, it's naturally going to force prices of homes up, which is the exact opposite of the stated intent of her policies or ideology. And that really brings me to my last point, and it's a real concern that I have. And I don't know. I don't know if anybody really can come up with an effective plan to deal with homelessness here in Toronto, or the drug issues that we're having, or the violence that we're having on the TTC. But I look to other cities where you have similarly minded ideological leadership. And you can look at Seattle and you can look at the gutting of San Francisco, which is just heartbreaking. And it becomes a concern because since COVID, our city is starting to very slightly head into that direction. And it really is concerning because the last thing we ever want to do is see our downtown core get hollowed out by homelessness and policies that are ineffective at dealing with the issue. So hopefully I'm wrong on this. I love Toronto. I think this is an amazing and incredible place to call our home. But the long and the short of it is, I would hate to see lax policies and progressivism in a certain way take hold in our city, which would allow the conditions that we've seen in cities like Seattle or San Francisco take hold here in Toronto. So that's just something to leave you on. I love Toronto. I really would love to see affordability at least ease in the city. But the long and the short of it is not going to happen through government controls and through government agencies. It's going to happen by incentivizing the public sector and by giving clear guidance to them to build efficiently and giving them the incentivizations to do so. So that's my little rant for today. I hope you like the information that we've gone through here. If you'd like to stay in touch with us, please hit that subscribe button down below or smash the like button. And if you have any comments, we'd absolutely love to hear from you.